So it sounds to me that when you're talking about marketing and the way our culture markets to children, you're talking about a structural system within our society which perpetuates gender norms. Um, and my understanding of the Greens policy as it stands is it's based on a principle to, and I quote, that social structures which disadvantage women must be changed. Are those some of the social structures you're referring to in that policy?
Well, look, there are so many, and in essence, society remains a bit of a boys' club, and certainly the parliament that I represent Queensland in remains a bit of a boys' club. And when you look at why we have unequal representation of women in our parliaments, on our boards, in our senior levels of all sorts of organisations, and question why, there's all sorts of parameters there. For a start, there's history, in that traditionally women weren't allowed to work. We had to stay at home and keep the house ticking over. Well, often we still share the bulk of those unpaid domestic and caring duties, but now we're in the workforce as well. But we're still somehow managed to expected to keep all of those balls in the air. The lack of affordable childcare is another systemic barrier to women accessing the workforce in a more practical and equitable manner. The fact that there's a culture of promoting and selecting people who are like yourself means that there's a sense of perpetuating gender inequality in large organisations, which is why it's been so important to have a recent reform which is gender equality reporting, which applies to companies that employ more than 100 people, to actually look at whether they've got a gender pay gap and look at how they're dealing with gender disparity within their organisations, to identify that and therefore arm themselves with the information to take steps to fix any of that inequity or disparity, particularly as regards pay. So it's the whole range of pressures on the modern woman, given that we still do the bulk of unpaid caring work. We often still are the primary caregiver for any kids. We therefore tend to take time out of the workforce to do that child rearing. Therefore, one misses out on promotions more so than male counterparts. We've then got to keep all of the balls in the air, as I said before. There's that disincentive, and often in traditionally male-dominated workforces, it's hard to be the first one to break the glass ceiling. You carry a lot on your shoulders to try and do that. And I feel that a little in the Parliament still, particularly in the Senate, which is dominated with well, frankly, a whole lot of old white guys that all wear blue ties and that are predominantly conservative. But you just got to try and pave the way and change those attitudes, because that's why these stereotypes and disadvantages still perpetuate. It's because people's attitudes allow them to. So it's a job for each and every one of us, the men as well, of course, to challenge those stereotypes and to put ourselves out there as best as we can and try to break down those barriers, because ultimately we will succeed. It's just a bit of an uphill battle in the meantime.
Absolutely. So you've actually identified a few of those structural disadvantages that you as a woman have faced through your work by essentially being in what you said was an old white man's club. Are there other structural disadvantages that you've personally experienced? One of the biggest problems, I guess, when we're talking about gender equality is it's difficult to quantify those experiences.
Look, I feel like I've been very fortunate in my life in that I've worked in workplaces in my later working years which have been female dominated, and I've had some really strong female mentors, and I think that's really helped me. And I try wherever possible to assist other young women in the fields of politics or law or in whatever context that I fall over them. I try to encourage young women, particularly because that mentoring has really helped me to aim high. I guess in terms of the barriers that I still face, I'm a lot younger than a lot of the people in Parliament. I probably can't say that for many more years, but I still feel a lot younger, and I am one of the few women in the Senate chamber. And frequently, more frequently than is appropriate, the older Liberal, particularly Liberal senators, try to talk over me in things like committee meetings or hearings. And I always refuse to be talked over. It's the little things that you've got to arrest if we're to make systemic deep change. And so I refuse to be talked over or ignored. I finish having my say. I'm not rude about it. I just politely but firmly let them know that I haven't finished my point and I intend to do so. I guess that's sort of the grossest discrimination that I've personally faced. But then I've been very privileged in my life. I've had a good education and I've had those strong female mentors. Not every girl has that fortune that I've had and that luck. So that's why I think it's all of our roles to encourage young women to back themselves and to aim high and to not let anyone say that they can't achieve their goals if they set their mind to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're going into practicing feminism on a daily basis, what do you do within the party to make sure that the party practice what it preaches and tries to dissemble those really quite pervasive structural disadvantages that women face?
Look, I feel really blessed to be in a party where we've always had more women elected to Parliament than we have men in the Greens, and that's a real anomaly compared to the other political parties. Many of those other parties have to take active steps to try and promote female candidates. We are lucky and fortunate in that we've always had more women than men, and we've always, I think, intuitively turned our minds to promoting female candidates. We haven't needed to have a rule that says you should do so. Our members who choose our candidates, pre-select our candidates, I think have those issues on their mind and actively promote female candidates. So we have a great track record in that regard. And just reflecting on my personal experience as a candidate much earlier on when I first began to seek to enter politics, we had a great range of members who were around me and assisting, and I had a number of lovely women just say, look, I know you just had a baby and you're running for election, can I bring you around a meal to save you cooking that night? And it's those little things where we women just support each other. And I had my mum offering to clean the house for me, bless her soul, which I gratefully accepted. It's those small practical supports that really make a difference. And it's the fact that people were prepared to back me as a young woman to run as a candidate in the first place. So I feel that we've done a fairly good job in that regard, and often we're criticised for not having more men chosen to be candidates. Well, when the Parliament's equal, we'll turn our minds to that. But I think we certainly could do better in terms of the representation of other cultures in our pre-selection. And we need some more LGBTIQ candidates as well, frankly. So we've got a way to go on those other measures, but I think we're doing really well in terms of affirmative action for women.